Introduction. What do you do when the toxic person isn't a stranger you can cut out of your life? What if it's your mother, your father, your spouse, or your boss? What do you do when the person draining your energy, twisting your words, and making you feel guilty for things you didn't even do, is someone you're expected to love, trust, or work with every single day? You can't just block their number or delete them from your life like a bad memory. You're trapped. Or at least, that's how it feels. And every conversation leaves you exhausted, confused, questioning your own sanity, wondering if maybe, just maybe, you really are the problem. You know that feeling, don't you? When you walk away from a conversation and something inside you feels wrong, like you've been hollowed out, drained of every ounce of energy you had just moments before. You can't quite put your finger on what happened, because on the surface, everything seemed normal. Just a regular conversation, a simple request, maybe even a friendly check-in. But somewhere deep in your gut, you feel it. The tightness in your chest, the knot in your stomach. The creeping sense that you've been manipulated, used, and left feeling guilty for things you didn't even do. If you've ever felt this way after talking to a certain person, whether it's a partner, a parent, a friend, or a colleague, then you already know the truth. Toxic people don't announce themselves with warning signs and flashing lights. They slip into your life quietly, wearing masks of care and concern, and by the time you realize what's happening, they've already drained you dry. Here's what nobody tells you about manipulation. It's not always loud, aggressive, or obvious. The most dangerous manipulators are the ones who smile while they twist your words, who hug you while they plant seeds of doubt, who claim to love you while they erode your sense of reality piece by piece. They don't attack you directly. They make you question yourself. They don't scream. They whisper just enough to make you feel like you're losing your mind. And the worst part? You blame yourself. You think you're too sensitive, too emotional, too difficult. You apologize for things that aren't your fault. And you walk on eggshells trying not to upset someone who will be upset no matter what you do. This is not your imagination, and this is not your fault. What you're experiencing is real, and it has a name: psychological manipulation. This audiobook exists for one reason: to give you the tools to recognize manipulation the moment it happens, to protect yourself before the damage is done, and to reclaim the power that toxic people have stolen from you. In the next few hours, you're going to learn how to spot a manipulator in just 5 minutes, how to identify the subtle tactics they use to control you, and most importantly, how to defend yourself without guilt, without fear, and without apology. You'll discover the psychology behind manipulation, the red flags that reveal a toxic person's true intentions, and the strategies that will make you untouchable to anyone trying to drain your energy or twist your reality. So what's in this audiobook? We're going to start by breaking down the anatomy of toxicity, why certain people seem to have an uncanny ability to find and target empathetic, compassionate individuals like you. You'll learn about the phrases manipulators use that sound caring on the surface, but are designed to make you doubt yourself and feel guilty. We'll dive deep into gaslighting, one of the most insidious forms of manipulation, where someone makes you question your own memory, perception, and sanity. You'll understand the psychology behind emotional roller coasters. Those relationships where one day everything is perfect, and the next day you're walking on eggshells, never knowing which version of the person you're going to get. Then we'll get to the heart of this audiobook, the 5-minute test that will help you recognize a manipulator instantly, so you never have to waste years of your life trying to fix someone who doesn't want to change. After that, we'll explore powerful techniques like the gray rock method, which will teach you how to become emotionally invisible to toxic people. And we'll talk about how to set boundaries without guilt. Because saying no is not selfish, it's self-preservation. And yes, we're going to tackle the hardest question head-on. What do you do when you can't just walk away? We'll address the most difficult situations, giving you practical strategies for protecting yourself, even when the toxic person is your parent, your partner, or your boss. You'll learn how to handle toxic family members without destroying your sense of self, how to survive a manipulative work environment without sacrificing your sanity, and most importantly, how to recognize when it's time to walk away, even when everyone around you is telling you to stay. Now, let's be honest about something. This audiobook isn't going to tell you that toxic people can change if you just love them enough, or that setting boundaries will magically transform a manipulator into a caring, respectful human being. The truth is harder than that, and you deserve to hear it. Some people will never change, no matter how much you sacrifice, how patient you are, or how many chances you give them. Manipulation is not a mistake. It's a pattern. And if someone is repeatedly making you feel small, confused, guilty, or exhausted, they are showing you exactly who they are. Your job is not to fix them. Your job is to protect yourself. You might be wondering, why didn't I see this before? How did I let this happen? Stop right there. Manipulation thrives on secrecy and confusion. And the reason you didn't see it before is because manipulators are experts at hiding their tactics behind concern, love, humor, or even victimhood. You're not weak for falling into these traps. You're human. Empathy and compassion are strengths, not weaknesses. And the only reason manipulators target people like you is because you care. But caring doesn't mean you have to be a doormat. Kindness doesn't mean tolerating abuse. And protecting yourself doesn't make you cold or heartless. It makes you wise. So here's what's going to happen. By the time you finish this audiobook, you're going to have a completely different lens through which you see relationships. You'll be able to spot manipulation tactics the moment they start. You'll have the language to articulate what's being done to you. And you'll have the tools to shut it down without second-guessing yourself. You'll stop apologizing for things that aren't your fault. You'll stop making excuses for people who don't deserve your energy. And you'll start building a life surrounded by people who respect you, support you, and value you for who you are, not for what you can give them. This is your shield. This is your protection. And this is your permission to stop being the target. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Anatomy of Toxicity. Why Manipulators Choose You. Have you ever wondered why toxic people seem to find you, no matter where you go or how hard you try to avoid them? It's almost like they have a radar, isn't it? An invisible sensor that locks onto certain people and marks them as targets. You could be in a room full of strangers, and somehow the manipulator will zero in on you, strike up a conversation, and within weeks or months, you'll find yourself trapped in the same exhausting cycle you've experienced before. The criticism disguised as concern, the guilt trips, the feeling that no matter what you do, it's never enough. And you start to wonder, is it me? Am I doing something wrong? Am I attracting this? The answer is both yes and no. And understanding the difference could change your life. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth. Manipulators don't target everyone. They're selective, strategic, and incredibly skilled at identifying the people who are most likely to tolerate their behavior. And the traits that make you a target aren't weaknesses. They're actually some of your greatest strengths. Empathy, compassion, a deep sense of responsibility, a desire to help others, a willingness to give people the benefit of the doubt. These are beautiful qualities. And in healthy relationships, they create deep connections, trust, and mutual support. But in the hands of a manipulator, these same qualities become tools they can use to control you. They don't see your kindness as something to cherish. They see it as something to exploit. And the scariest part? They know exactly what they're doing. So what makes someone a perfect target for a manipulator? First, you're someone who feels responsible for other people's emotions. When someone is upset, you instinctively try to fix it, even if you didn't cause the problem. Manipulators recognize this immediately, and they use it against you by making their emotions your responsibility. They'll say things like, "You're the only person who understands me," or, "I don't know what I'd do without you," which sounds loving on the surface, but is actually a trap. What they're really saying is, "You are now responsible for my happiness, and if I'm unhappy, it's your fault." And because you care deeply about not hurting people, you'll bend over backward trying to keep them happy, even when it's impossible. Second, you're someone who avoids conflict. You don't like drama, confrontation, or making people uncomfortable. So when a manipulator crosses a boundary, you're more likely to let it slide than to call them out. They test you early. Small boundary violations, little comments that feel off but aren't quite bad enough to address. And when you don't push back, they know they can go further. Third, you're a natural problem solver. When something goes wrong, your first instinct is to figure out how to fix it. Manipulators love this because it means you'll take on the emotional labor of the relationship while they sit back and benefit. They create chaos, and you clean it up. They hurt you, and you try to understand why. They disrespect your boundaries, and you wonder what you did to deserve it. See the pattern? But here's what most people don't realize. Manipulation isn't random, and it's not accidental. It's a pattern of behavior that toxic people use intentionally because it works. They don't wake up one day and decide to manipulate you. They've been doing this their entire lives, refining their tactics, learning what works and what doesn't. And the reason it works is because they're testing you constantly. Every interaction is a test. When you first meet a manipulator, they're charming, attentive, maybe even a little too interested in you. This is called love bombing in romantic relationships. But it happens in all kinds of relationships. Friendships, family dynamics, work environments. They shower you with attention, make you feel special, and create a sense of closeness that feels almost too good to be true. And here's the critical part. While they're doing this, they're watching how you respond. Do you light up when they compliment you? Do you feel flattered when they confide in you? Do you rush to help when they mention a problem? Every time you respond positively to their manipulation tactics, they file that information away and use it later. They're building a psychological profile of you, figuring out your weak spots, your triggers, your fears, and your needs. And once they have that information, they'll use it to control you. Let me give you an example. Imagine you meet someone new, a friend, a co-worker, a romantic partner. And early on, they ask you for a small favor. Maybe they need a ride, or they ask to borrow something, or they want you to cover for them at work. It's not a big deal, so you say yes. And they're so grateful, so appreciative, that it feels good to help. But then the requests get bigger and more frequent. And suddenly, you're the person they call every time they need something. But when you need help, they're conveniently unavailable. What just happened? They ran a test. The first small favor was bait, designed to see if you're the kind of person who says yes even when it's inconvenient. And because you passed their test, they know they can keep pushing. This is how manipulators work. They don't start with the big ask. They start small, build trust, and then escalate. So what can you do about this? The first step is awareness. You need to recognize that being targeted by a manipulator doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means there's something right with you. You're kind, empathetic, and willing to give people a chance. Those are strengths, not flaws. But you also need to understand that not everyone deserves access to those qualities. The second step is to start paying attention to patterns, not just individual incidents. One boundary violation might be a mistake. 2 might be a coincidence. But 3? That's a pattern, and patterns reveal intention. If someone repeatedly makes you feel guilty, drained, confused, or small, they're showing you who they are. Believe them. And the third step, the one we'll dive deeper into in the next chapters, is learning how to protect yourself without losing your compassion. You don't have to become cold or cynical to defend yourself against toxic people. You just have to get smarter about who gets access to your time, energy, and trust. Because here's the thing. Manipulators will always exist. But whether or not they succeed in controlling you is entirely up to you. And that's what the rest of this book is about. Giving you the tools to recognize manipulation the moment it starts, so you can stop it before it takes root. You're not powerless. You're not a victim. You're someone who's been targeted by people who saw your kindness and mistook it for weakness. But now that you understand how they operate, you're going to become someone they can't touch. Chapter 2. The Manipulator's Dictionary. There are phrases that give them away. There are certain phrases that should make your blood run cold, not because they're openly hostile or obviously abusive, but because they're so perfectly designed to make you doubt yourself, feel guilty, and question your own reality. These phrases are the manipulator's go-to tools. The verbal weapons they pull out whenever they need to regain control, shift blame, or make you feel like you're the problem. They sound so reasonable, so caring, so normal that you might not even realize you're being manipulated until you've already apologized, backed down, or convinced yourself that you were overreacting. But once you learn to recognize these phrases for what they are, red flags wrapped in concern, you'll never fall for them again. Let's start with one of the most insidious phrases in the manipulator's vocabulary. I'm just trying to help. On the surface, this sounds supportive, doesn't it? Someone who cares about you, offering guidance, trying to make your life better. But here's the thing. When a manipulator says this, what they really mean is, I'm criticizing you, but if you get upset, I'll make it seem like you're ungrateful. This phrase is almost always followed by unsolicited advice, harsh judgment, or thinly veiled criticism disguised as concern. They'll tear apart your decisions, question your judgment, and undermine your confidence. And when you try to defend yourself or set a boundary, they'll act hurt and say, I'm just trying to help. Why are you being so sensitive? The goal here is to make you feel guilty for not accepting their help, which is really just control dressed up in a caring package. A genuinely helpful person respects your boundaries and backs off when you say no. A manipulator doubles down and makes you feel bad for rejecting their interference. Then there's the classic, you're too sensitive. This one is designed to invalidate your emotions and make you question whether your feelings are even legitimate. When you tell a manipulator that something they said or did hurt you, instead of apologizing or acknowledging your pain, they flip the script and make the problem about you. You're too sensitive. You're overreacting. You always take things the wrong way. What they're really saying is, your emotions are inconvenient to me, so I'm going to make you believe they're invalid. And if they say this enough times, you'll start to internalize it. You'll stop trusting your own feelings. You'll hesitate before speaking up because you don't want to be too sensitive again. And that's exactly what they want. A version of you that's easier to control because you've learned to silence yourself. Here's the truth. Your feelings are valid. If something hurts you, it hurts you. Period. And anyone who responds to your pain by dismissing it isn't someone who deserves access to your emotional world. Next up, after everything I've done for you. This phrase is pure manipulation, and it's all about weaponizing your sense of obligation. Manipulators keep a mental scoreboard of every favor, every kind gesture, every moment they've helped you, and they'll cash in those chips whenever they need to guilt you into doing what they want. The message is clear. You owe me. And if you don't comply, you're ungrateful, selfish, and disloyal. But here's what they don't tell you. Real kindness doesn't come with strings attached. When someone genuinely cares about you, they don't keep a running tab of everything they've done so they can throw it in your face later. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect and support, not transactional exchanges where love and care are currency used to manipulate. So when someone says, "After everything I've done for you," what they're really saying is, "I didn't do those things out of love. I did them so I could control you later." Now let's talk about one of the most dangerous phrases. You're imagining things. Or, that never happened. This is gaslighting in its purest form, and it's designed to make you question your own memory and perception of reality. Maybe you remember a conversation where they said something hurtful. But when you bring it up, they look at you like you're crazy and insist it never happened. Or maybe they promised you something, but now they're denying they ever said it. Over time, this erodes your trust in yourself. You start second-guessing your memories, wondering if maybe you really are imagining things. And that's exactly what the manipulator wants. Because once you stop trusting yourself, you'll start relying on them to tell you what's real. And that gives them complete control over your reality. The antidote to this? Start documenting. Keep a journal. Save text messages. Record conversations if necessary. Not because you're paranoid, but because you deserve to trust yourself. And having evidence protects you from someone who's trying to rewrite history. Here's another one. No one else will ever love you like I do. Or, no one else will put up with you. This phrase is designed to make you feel trapped, like you're so damaged, so difficult, so fundamentally unlovable, that this person is the only one who will tolerate you. It's isolation disguised as love. What they're really saying is, I need you to believe that you have no other options, so you'll stay with me no matter how badly I treat you. And if you hear this enough, you'll start to believe it. You'll convince yourself that you're lucky to have this person, even if they make you miserable, because who else would want you? But here's the truth. If someone truly loves you, they don't hold your insecurities over your head or make you feel like you're a burden. They lift you up, not tear you down. And if someone is telling you that no one else will love you, it's because they're terrified that you'll realize you deserve better and leave. Let's not forget. I was just joking. Don't be so serious. This is the manipulator's get-out-of-jail-free card. They say something cruel, offensive, or humiliating. And when you react with hurt or anger, they laugh it off and act like you're the one with the problem for not having a sense of humor. It was just a joke. Why are you so uptight? Learn to take a joke. But here's the thing. Jokes are supposed to be funny. If the punchline is your pain, your insecurity, or your humiliation, It's not a joke. It's cruelty disguised as humor. And when you call them out, they deflect by making you seem humorless and overly sensitive. The goal is to train you not to react, so they can keep insulting, belittling, and disrespecting you without consequences. Don't fall for it. If something hurts, it's not a joke, and you have every right to say so. And finally, there's the ultimate manipulation phrase. If you really loved me, you'd. This one is all about guilt and emotional blackmail. The manipulator is essentially saying, prove your love by sacrificing your needs, your boundaries, and your well-being for me. If you really loved me, you'd forgive me. If you really loved me, you'd do this favor. If you really loved me, you'd stop complaining. It's a trap, because no matter what you do, it will never be enough. Real love doesn't demand proof. It doesn't make you jump through hoops or sacrifice your dignity to validate someone else's ego. Real love respects boundaries, values your needs, and doesn't weaponize your emotions. So here's what you need to understand. These phrases aren't random. They're part of a deliberate strategy to control you. And once you recognize them, you'll start seeing them everywhere. The good news? Once you know what to listen for, these phrases lose their power. You'll hear, "I'm just trying to help." And instead of feeling guilty, you'll recognize it for what it is. An attempt to disguise criticism as concern. You'll hear, "You're too sensitive." And instead of doubting yourself, you'll trust your feelings and walk away from someone who refuses to respect them. Because now you know. And knowledge is the first line of defense. Chapter 3. Gaslighting. When they make you doubt your own reality. Imagine this. You remember a conversation clearly, word for word, the tone, the context, even where you were standing when it happened. Maybe it was an argument, or a promise someone made, or something hurtful they said that's been replaying in your mind ever since. So you bring it up, hoping to address it, maybe even hoping for an apology. But instead of acknowledging what happened, the other person looks at you with genuine confusion, maybe even concern, and says, "That never happened. You're remembering it wrong. I never said that." And suddenly, you're the one who feels crazy, like maybe your memory is faulty. Maybe you really are imagining things. This is gaslighting. And it's one of the most dangerous forms of psychological manipulation because it doesn't just hurt you in the moment. It dismantles your ability to trust yourself. The term gaslighting comes from a 1944 film called Gaslight, where a husband systematically manipulates his wife into believing she's losing her mind by dimming the gaslights in their home, and then insisting she's imagining it when she notices. It's a perfect metaphor for what gaslighting does in real life. It takes something you know to be true and convinces you that it isn't, slowly eroding your sense of reality until you can't tell what's real anymore. And here's the terrifying part. Gaslighting doesn't happen all at once. It's a gradual process, so subtle that you don't realize it's happening until you're already deeply confused, doubting yourself at every turn, and relying on the gaslighter to tell you what's real. So how does gaslighting actually work? It starts with small denials. Maybe someone makes a joke at your expense, and when you say it hurt your feelings, they laugh it off and say, "I never said that." Or, "You're being dramatic. It wasn't that bad." You know what you heard, but they're so confident in their denial that you start to question yourself. Did I mishear? Am I overreacting? Maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. This is stage 1, planting the seeds of doubt. The gaslighter isn't trying to convince you that they're right. They're trying to convince you that you're wrong. And once you start doubting your perception of one conversation, it becomes easier to doubt the next one and the next one until you're second-guessing everything. Stage 2 is when the gaslighter starts rewriting history. They don't just deny what they said or did. They create an entirely different version of events and insist that their version is the truth. You had an argument, and you remember them yelling at you, calling you names, maybe even threatening to leave. But when you try to talk about it later, they calmly tell you, "I never yelled. You're the one who was screaming. I was just trying to have a calm conversation, and you lost control." And if they say it with enough conviction, you'll start to wonder, did I really lose control? Was I the problem? This is the goal: to make you feel like you're the unstable one, the irrational one, the one who can't be trusted. Because once you believe that, you'll stop trusting your own judgment and start deferring to theirs. Stage 3 is where gaslighting becomes truly insidious. Isolation from your own reality. At this point, you're so deep in the manipulation that you've stopped trusting yourself altogether. You don't trust your memories, your perceptions, or even your feelings. When something feels wrong, instead of trusting that instinct, you dismiss it because you've been conditioned to believe that your instincts are unreliable. You start asking the gaslighter to confirm basic facts about your life. Did this conversation happen? Did I really say that? Am I remembering this correctly? And every time you ask, they reinforce the idea that you can't trust yourself, but you can trust them. This is the ultimate goal of gaslighting: to make you completely dependent on the manipulator's version of reality. Let me tell you about someone who lived this. Her name was Rachel, and she spent 5 years in a relationship with a man who was a master gaslighter. It started small. He'd make plans with her, then insist she'd gotten the day wrong. He'd criticize her appearance, then claim he was just joking, and she was too sensitive. But over time, it escalated. He'd tell her she said things she had no memory of saying. He'd accuse her of doing things she knew she hadn't done. And when she tried to defend herself, he'd look at her with pity and say, "I'm worried about you. You're not remembering things correctly? Maybe you should see a doctor." By the end, Rachel couldn't trust her own mind. She started keeping a journal, writing down conversations and events as they happened, because she needed proof that she wasn't losing her sanity. And when she finally left, it took her months to rebuild her trust in herself, to stop second-guessing every thought and feeling, to believe that her reality was valid. So how do you protect yourself from gaslighting? First, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Gaslighting works because it convinces you to ignore your instincts. But your instincts exist for a reason. They're your brain's way of alerting you to danger. So when someone denies something you know happened, don't let them talk you out of what you experienced. Second, document everything. Keep a journal. Save text messages and emails. Record conversations if you need to. This isn't about being paranoid. It's about protecting your sanity. When someone tries to tell you that a conversation never happened, you'll have proof that it did. And that proof isn't just for them. It's for you to remind yourself that you're not crazy, you're not imagining things, and your memory is reliable. Third, talk to someone outside the situation. Gaslighting thrives in isolation. So one of the best defenses is to have a trusted friend, family member, or therapist who can give you an outside perspective. When you're deep in the fog of manipulation, it's hard to see clearly. But someone who isn't being gaslit can help you recognize what's really happening. And here's the most important thing you need to understand. If someone is gaslighting you, it's not because you're weak or gullible or easy to manipulate. It's because gaslighting is an incredibly effective psychological tactic that can fool anyone. The fact that you're questioning yourself doesn't mean you're broken. It means someone has deliberately and systematically worked to break down your trust in yourself. But you can rebuild that trust. You can reclaim your reality. And you can walk away from anyone who tries to convince you that your experiences, your memories, and your feelings aren't real. Because the truth is, you are not imagining things. You are not too sensitive. You are not crazy. And anyone who tries to make you believe otherwise is showing you exactly who they are. The question is, are you going to believe them? Or are you going to believe yourself? Chapter 4. Emotional roller coasters. The psychology of hot and cold behavior. One day, they're the most loving, attentive, thoughtful person you've ever known. Texting you constantly, making you feel special, telling you how much you mean to them. And then, without warning, they go cold. The messages stop. The affection disappears. They're distant, irritable, critical, maybe even cruel. And you're left standing there, confused and desperate, wondering what you did wrong, replaying every conversation in your mind, trying to figure out how you went from being everything to being nothing in the span of 24 hours. So you try harder. You reach out. You apologize for things you didn't even do. And just when you're about to give up, they flip the switch again. Suddenly they're warm, loving, apologetic. And you feel that rush of relief because the person you care about is back. But here's the truth. This isn't love. This is manipulation. And it's one of the most effective ways toxic people keep you hooked. This pattern is called intermittent reinforcement. And it's the same psychological principle that makes slot machines so addictive. When you pull the lever on a slot machine, you don't win every time. In fact, you lose most of the time. But every so often, you win. And that unpredictable reward creates a powerful dopamine response in your brain that keeps you coming back for more. You keep pulling the lever, hoping that this time will be the time you hit the jackpot, even though you're losing far more than you're winning. And that's exactly what's happening in a hot and cold relationship. The person isn't consistently kind or consistently cruel. They alternate between the two. And that unpredictability creates an addictive cycle that's incredibly hard to break. Your brain becomes wired to chase the highs, to work harder during the lows in hopes of earning back the warmth, and to stay trapped in a relationship that's slowly destroying you. Let's break down how this cycle works. It starts with the idealization phase, where the toxic person showers you with affection, attention, and validation. They make you feel like the most important person in the world. They text you constantly, remember the little things, compliment you, and make grand gestures that sweep you off your feet. This is often called love bombing, and it feels incredible. Like you've finally found someone who truly sees you, values you, and appreciates you. But here's what's really happening. They're creating an emotional high, a baseline of what the relationship feels like when things are good. And once that baseline is established, they can use it as a weapon. Because now you know what it feels like to be loved by this person, and you'll do anything to get back to that feeling when it's taken away. Then comes the devaluation phase. Without warning, the warmth disappears. They become distant, cold, critical, or outright cruel. Maybe they start picking fights over nothing. Maybe they withdraw affection and give you the silent treatment. Maybe they flirt with other people or threaten to leave. And you're left scrambling, desperate to understand what changed. Convinced that if you can just figure out what you did wrong, you can fix it and get back to the good times. This is the trap. Because the devaluation phase isn't about anything you did. It's a calculated move to destabilize you, to make you feel insecure, and to train you to work harder for their approval. The goal is to make you so afraid of losing them that you'll tolerate disrespect, mistreatment, and abuse, just to avoid being abandoned. And just when you're at your lowest, when you're about to walk away or confront them, they switch back to the idealization phase. They apologize. They tell you they've been stressed, that they didn't mean it, that they love you and can't imagine life without you. And because you've been starved of affection and validation, this sudden return to warmth feels like oxygen after being underwater. You forgive them. You convince yourself that the bad times were just a rough patch, that the real person is the loving one, and that if you just try harder, you can keep that version of them around. But the cycle doesn't end there. It repeats, over and over. And each time it repeats, the lows get lower, the highs get shorter, and your sense of self-worth erodes a little bit more. But why is this so dangerous? Your brain starts to associate love with chaos. In a healthy relationship, love is steady, reliable, and consistent. You don't have to earn it, you don't have to chase it, and you don't have to live in fear of losing it. But in a hot and cold relationship, love becomes something you have to fight for. Something that's constantly just out of reach. Something that's given and taken away based on the whims of someone else. And over time, your brain starts to believe that this is what love is supposed to feel like. Dramatic, unpredictable, intense. You become addicted to the highs because the lows are so unbearable. And you convince yourself that the passion, the intensity, the emotional roller coaster is proof that the relationship is real and meaningful. But intensity is not intimacy. Drama is not love. And a relationship that makes you feel anxious, insecure, and exhausted is not one worth staying in. Let me tell you about someone who broke free from this cycle. His name was David, and he spent 2 years in a relationship with a woman who ran hot and cold constantly. One week, she'd tell him he was the love of her life, that she couldn't live without him, that she wanted to build a future together. The next week, she'd ignore his calls, criticize everything he did, and hint that she was thinking about leaving. David spent those 2 years walking on eggshells, constantly trying to be the perfect partner, convinced that if he just loved her enough, the good times would last. It took him hitting rock bottom, a panic attack, a sleepless night where he realized he couldn't remember the last time he felt genuinely happy, before he understood that the relationship wasn't going to get better. When he finally left, it took months to detox from the emotional roller coaster, to stop craving the highs, and to learn that love isn't supposed to hurt. So how do you break free from an emotional roller coaster? First, recognize the pattern. If someone is consistently inconsistent, if you never know which version of them you're going to get, that's a red flag, not a sign of passion. Second, stop blaming yourself. The hot and cold behavior has nothing to do with you and everything to do with their need for control. You can't fix it by being better, more patient, or more understanding, because the problem isn't you, it's them. Third, set a boundary and stick to it. Tell yourself, I will not accept treatment that makes me feel anxious, insecure, or worthless. And when someone crosses that boundary, walk away. Not because you don't care, but because you care about yourself more than you care about chasing someone who's using your emotions as a weapon. Because here's what you need to understand. You deserve consistency. You deserve to be with someone who doesn't make you guess how they feel, who doesn't punish you with silence and withdrawal, who doesn't dangle love in front of you like a carrot on a stick. You deserve relationships that are calm, stable, and secure. Not because they're boring, but because they're healthy. And if someone can't give you that, they don't deserve access to your heart. Chapter 5. Your 5-minute shield. How to spot a manipulator instantly. 5 minutes. That's all it takes to recognize a manipulator if you know what to look for. Not 5 days, not 5 weeks, not 5 months of confusion, doubt, and emotional exhaustion. Just 5 minutes of focused attention, listening to what they say, watching how they act, and trusting your gut when something feels off. Most people waste years of their lives trying to figure out why a relationship feels wrong, replaying conversations, analyzing mixed signals, and giving toxic people the benefit of the doubt over and over again. But what if you didn't have to do that? What if you could walk into any interaction with a clear set of criteria that would tell you, within minutes, whether this person is safe or whether there's someone you need to keep at arm's length? That's what this chapter is about, giving you a shield, a filter, a radar that protects you before the damage is done. Let's start with the most important tool you have, your body. Your body knows when something is wrong long before your brain catches up, because your nervous system is designed to detect danger. So the first test is simple. How do you feel in this person's presence? Not what you think about them, not what they're saying, not how charming or impressive they seem, but how your body responds. Do you feel relaxed, open, and at ease? Or do you feel tense, guarded, and on edge, like you're walking on eggshells or preparing for something to go wrong? Manipulators create a subtle sense of unease, even when they're being nice, because their energy's off. They might smile, but there's something cold behind the smile. They might compliment you, but it doesn't feel genuine. It feels transactional, like they're buttering you up for something. Pay attention to that feeling. If your stomach tightens, if your shoulders tense, if you suddenly feel the need to be extra careful with your words, that's your body telling you, this person is not safe. Trust that signal. The second test is how they talk about other people. Within the first few minutes of meeting someone, they'll usually reveal how they treat people when no one is watching. Listen to how they talk about their ex, their coworkers, their family, their friends. Are they constantly the victim in every story? Is everyone else always the problem? The crazy ex, the incompetent boss, the ungrateful friend? Do they trash talk people who aren't there to defend themselves? If someone spends the first conversation telling you how terrible everyone in their life is, that's a red flag the size of a billboard. Because here's the truth. How they talk about others is how they'll eventually talk about you. If they're willing to betray, criticize, and badmouth the people who were once close to them, they'll do the same to you the moment you step out of line. On the flip side, if someone speaks respectfully about others, even when describing a conflict or a breakup, that's a green flag. It shows maturity, accountability, and emotional intelligence. The third test is the boundary check. This is one of the most reliable ways to spot a manipulator, and it's incredibly simple. Say no to something small and watch how they react. It doesn't have to be a big no, just a minor boundary, like declining an invitation, saying you're not comfortable with a certain topic, or pushing back on an opinion. A healthy person will respect your boundary without drama. They might feel disappointed, but they won't punish you, guilt-trip you, or make you feel bad for asserting yourself. A manipulator, on the other hand, will react with some version of, "Why not? Come on, don't be like that. I thought you were different. Wow, I didn't think you'd be so uptight." They'll question your boundary, challenge it, or make you feel guilty for having it. And if you give in, they'll file that information away and know that you can be pushed. This test works because manipulators need control, and boundaries are a direct threat to their control. So when you assert one, even a tiny one, their mask slips for just a second. And that's all you need to see. The fourth test is how they respond to your success or happiness. Mention something good that happened to you. A promotion, a compliment, an achievement, a moment of joy. And watch their reaction closely. A genuine person will celebrate with you, share your happiness, and make you feel supported. A manipulator will find a way to diminish it. They might offer a backhanded compliment. That's great, but don't you think? They might one-up you with their own story. They might downplay your accomplishment. Oh, that's not that big of a deal. Everyone gets those. Or they might redirect the conversation back to themselves without acknowledging what you said. This happens because manipulators are threatened by your success and happiness. It shifts the power dynamic, and they need to bring you back down to maintain control. If someone consistently makes you feel worse after sharing good news, that's not a friend, a partner, or a supportive person. That's someone who needs you to stay small so they can feel big. The fifth and final test is the vibe check. Do they build you up or tear you down? Within 5 minutes of conversation, a manipulator will drop subtle criticisms disguised as jokes, advice, or concern. You look tired. Are you okay? That's an interesting outfit choice. I'm just trying to help you. But maybe you should reconsider that decision. They plant seeds of doubt, making you question yourself in small ways that accumulate over time. A healthy person, on the other hand, makes you feel good about yourself. They notice your strengths, appreciate your qualities, and leave you feeling energized rather than drained. So ask yourself, after talking to this person for 5 minutes, do you feel more confident or less confident? More secure or more insecure? More like yourself or like you have to perform? The answer will tell you everything you need to know. Let me give you a real-life example. A woman named Lisa met someone at a networking event who seemed incredibly charismatic and friendly. But during their first 5-minute conversation, he interrupted her twice, made a joke about her profession, and when she mentioned a recent work achievement, he responded with, "Oh, that's cute," before launching into a story about his own accomplishments. Lisa's gut told her something was off, but she ignored it because he was charming and well-connected. 6 months later, after agreeing to work with him on a project, she realized he was manipulative, controlling, and took credit for her ideas. She wished she'd trusted that initial 5-minute instinct. The warning signs were all there. She just didn't know how to read them yet. So here's your 5-minute shield in summary. Trust your body. Listen to how they talk about others. Test their reaction to a boundary. See how they respond to your success. And pay attention to how they make you feel. If even one of these tests raises a red flag, proceed with extreme caution. If multiple tests fail, walk away. You don't owe anyone the benefit of the doubt, especially when your gut is screaming at you to run. Because the truth is, manipulators reveal themselves quickly if you're paying attention. They can't help it. Manipulation is who they are, and it leaks out in the first 5 minutes if you know where to look. You now have the shield. The question is, will you use it? Chapter 6. The Gray Rock Method. Becoming invisible to toxic people. What if the best way to defend yourself against a manipulator wasn't to fight back, argue, or explain yourself, but to become so boring, so uninteresting, so emotionally flat that they simply lose interest in you? That's the Gray Rock Method, and it's one of the most powerful strategies you can use when you can't escape a toxic person, but need to protect yourself from their manipulation. The concept is simple. You make yourself as unresponsive and unremarkable as a gray rock sitting on the side of the road. No drama, no emotion, no reaction. Just dull, neutral, and completely unengaging. And for manipulators who thrive on emotional reactions, who feed off your anger, your sadness, your fear, your desperation, being met with nothing is the ultimate shutdown. Here's why this works. Manipulators need fuel. They need your emotional response to feel powerful, to maintain control, and to keep you hooked in the cycle. When they provoke you and you react, whether you cry, yell, defend yourself, or try to explain, they win because they've gotten what they wanted. Your attention, your energy, and proof that they still have power over you. But when you give them nothing, when you respond with bland, emotionless, one-word answers and refuse to engage, they lose their power. It's like trying to start a fire with wet wood. No matter how hard they try, nothing catches. And eventually, they get bored and move on to someone who will give them the reaction they crave. So how do you actually become a gray rock? Let's start with your words. When a toxic person tries to engage with you, your responses should be as boring and factual as possible. No emotion, no detail, no vulnerability. If they ask, "How was your day?" you say, "Fine." Not, "It was amazing, I got a promotion," or "It was terrible, I'm so stressed." Just fine. If they try to bait you with criticism or drama, you say, "Okay," or "I see," or "That's interesting." And then you change the subject or walk away. You're not being rude. You're being neutral. You're giving them nothing to latch onto, nothing to twist, and nothing to use against you later. The goal is to make yourself so uninteresting that talking to you feels like talking to a wall. Next, control your body language. Manipulators are incredibly skilled at reading emotions, and they'll look for any sign that they're getting to you. A clenched jaw, tense shoulders, averted eyes, or a crack in your voice. So when you're in gray rock mode, your face should be calm and neutral, your posture relaxed, your tone flat. No smiling when they try to charm you. No frowning when they try to provoke you. No visible reaction at all. Think of it like playing poker. You're not giving away any tells. If they can't read your emotions, they can't manipulate them. And if they sense that their usual tactics aren't working, they'll either escalate briefly to test you or, more likely, lose interest and move on. Now let's talk about what you don't share. One of the biggest mistakes people make with toxic individuals is giving them access to personal information, your goals, your fears, your struggles, your joys. Manipulators weaponize that information. They use your dreams to mock you, your insecurities to control you, and your vulnerabilities to hurt you. So when you're using the gray rock method, you stop sharing anything meaningful. If they ask about your plans, you keep it vague. Nothing much. If they ask about your relationships, you say, "Everything's fine." If they try to pry into your emotions, you shut it down with, "I'm good, thanks." You're not lying, you're just putting up a wall, and that wall is made of boredom. The less they know about you, the less power they have. Here's a real-life example. A man named James had a toxic coworker who constantly tried to start drama, gossiping, stirring up conflict, and baiting James into arguments so she could then play the victim to their boss. For months, James engaged, trying to defend himself and set the record straight, which only gave her more ammunition. Then he learned about the gray rock method and completely changed his approach. When she tried to gossip, he'd say, "I don't know anything about that," and walk away. When she criticized his work, he'd respond with, "Okay, thanks for the feedback," without emotion or explanation. When she tried to provoke him in meetings, he stayed calm, kept his answers short, and refused to take the bait. Within a few weeks, she stopped targeting him and moved on to someone else who gave her the drama she craved. James didn't have to quit his job or confront her. He just became boring, and boring doesn't feed a manipulator's ego. But here's the part people struggle with. The gray rock method can feel wrong, especially if you're naturally warm, expressive, and empathetic. It might feel like you're being cold, shutting down, or betraying your authentic self. And that's true. You are shutting down, but only with people who have proven they don't deserve your authenticity. This isn't about becoming a robot in all your relationships. It's about protecting yourself in toxic ones. You can still be warm, open, and emotionally available with people who respect you. But with manipulators, your warmth is a weapon they'll use against you, so you take it away. Think of it like this. You wouldn't leave your front door unlocked in a dangerous neighborhood, right? The gray rock method is you locking the door to your emotional world so toxic people can't break in. Now, let's address the challenges. First, manipulators will often escalate when they realize their usual tactics aren't working. They might get angrier, more dramatic, or more aggressive in an attempt to provoke a reaction. This is called an extinction burst, and it's a last-ditch effort to regain control. If you stay consistent, if you remain calm, boring, and unresponsive, they'll eventually give up. But if you crack even once and give them the reaction they're looking for, you've reset the clock, and they'll know that if they just push hard enough, they can still get to you. So consistency is everything. Second, the gray rock method works best when you can't go no contact. If you can completely remove a toxic person from your life, do that. But if you're co-parenting with them, working with them, or dealing with a family member you can't avoid, gray rocking is your best defense. And finally, remember this. The gray rock method isn't about punishment or revenge. It's not about making the other person feel bad or teaching them a lesson. It's about protecting your peace. It's about refusing to let someone drain your energy, manipulate your emotions, or control your life. You're not shutting them out because you're cruel. You're shutting them out because they've proven they can't be trusted with access to the real you. And that's not cold. That's wisdom. So here's your gray rock toolkit. Keep your words short and boring. Control your body language and show no emotion. Stop sharing personal information. Stay consistent even when they escalate. And remind yourself that you're not being mean. You're being smart. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is become invisible to the people who want to destroy you. Chapter 7. Boundaries without guilt. How to say no and mean it. No is a complete sentence. You don't owe anyone an explanation, a justification, or an apology for protecting your time, your energy, or your peace. But if saying no feels impossible, if every time you try to set a boundary, you're flooded with guilt, fear, or the overwhelming urge to backtrack and say, "Never mind, it's fine," then you've been conditioned to believe that your needs don't matter as much as everyone else's. And that conditioning didn't happen by accident. It was taught to you by people who benefited from your inability to say no. People who trained you to prioritize their comfort over your well-being, and people who weaponized your guilt to keep you compliant. But here's the truth. Boundaries aren't selfish. They're survival. And learning to say no without guilt is one of the most powerful acts of self-respect you'll ever master. Let's start with why saying no feels so hard. For most people, it's because they've been taught that saying no makes them a bad person. Selfish, unkind, difficult, ungrateful. Maybe you grew up in a household where your needs were dismissed, where you were told to stop being difficult when you asked for something, or where love felt conditional, like you had to earn it by being agreeable and accommodating. Maybe you've been in relationships where every time you said no, you were punished with anger, the silent treatment, or guilt trips that made you feel like a terrible human being. Over time, your brain learned a dangerous equation. Saying no equals rejection, conflict, or loss of love. And to avoid those outcomes, you learned to say yes even when everything inside you was screaming no. But that pattern isn't protecting you. It's destroying you. Because every time you say yes when you mean no, you're telling yourself that other people's needs are more important than your own. And that belief will hollow you out until there's nothing left. So how do you break that pattern? The first step is to understand what boundaries actually are. Boundaries are not walls. They're not about shutting people out, being cold, or refusing to help anyone ever again. Boundaries are guidelines for how you expect to be treated, and they exist to protect your mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Think of them like the fence around your house. The fence doesn't mean you hate your neighbors or that you never want visitors. It just means that people can't barge into your yard uninvited, trash the place, and expect you to be okay with it. Boundaries say, "You can come into my life, but here are the rules. You can ask for my time, but I get to decide whether to give it. You can share your opinion, but you don't get to disrespect me. And if you can't respect those rules, you don't get access to me." That's not cruelty. That's self-preservation. Now let's talk about how to actually say no in a way that's firm, clear, and guilt-free. The key is to stop over-explaining. When you say no and then launch into a 10-minute justification of why you're saying no, you're not setting a boundary. You're negotiating, and negotiations can be overruled. Toxic people will latch onto your explanation, poke holes in it, and pressure you until you give in. So instead of saying, "I can't help you move this weekend because I have plans and I'm really tired and I've been so busy lately," you simply say, "I'm not available this weekend." That's it. No explanation, no apology, just a clear, calm statement of fact. If they push, why not? What are you doing? You repeat, "I'm not available." If they guilt trip you, "Wow, I thought I could count on you." You hold firm. "I understand you're disappointed, but I'm not available." The more you explain, the more ammunition you give them. The less you explain, the harder it is for them to manipulate you. Here's another critical piece. Stop apologizing for your boundaries. When you say, "I'm so sorry, but I can't do that," you're framing your boundary as something wrong, something you need to apologize for. But you don't. Saying no isn't a crime, and protecting yourself isn't something to feel guilty about. So instead of, "I'm sorry, I can't," try, "I won't be able to do that," or "that doesn't work for me." No apology. Just a statement. If someone tries to make you feel guilty for having boundaries, that's their problem, not yours. A healthy person will respect your no without making you grovel for it. A toxic person will punish you for it. And that punishment, the guilt trip, the anger, the silent treatment, is actually proof that your boundary was necessary. Let me give you an example. A woman named Maria had a mother who constantly demanded her time, energy, and money. And every time Maria tried to say no, her mother would cry, accuse her of being selfish, and bring up everything she'd ever done for Maria as a child. For years, Maria gave in, drowning in guilt and resentment. Then she learned to set boundaries without apologizing. The next time her mother asked for money, Maria said, "I'm not able to do that." Her mother escalated. "After everything I've done for you, you're going to let me struggle?" Maria stayed calm. "I understand you're upset, but my answer is no." Her mother hung up and didn't speak to her for 2 weeks, which Maria had been terrified of. But something unexpected happened. Maria didn't collapse. She felt lighter. And when her mother finally called again, Maria held the boundary. And over time, her mother learned that guilt trips no longer worked. The relationship didn't become perfect, but Maria finally had her power back. Now, let's address the guilt. Because even when you know intellectually that boundaries are healthy, you might still feel terrible when you set them. That guilt is normal, especially if you've spent your whole life being conditioned to prioritize others. But here's what you need to understand. Guilt is not the same as wrongdoing. Guilt is just an emotion, and emotions can be wrong. You can feel guilty and still be doing the right thing. So when the guilt shows up, acknowledge it. I feel guilty right now. And then remind yourself, but I am not doing anything wrong. I am protecting myself. And that is not selfish. That is necessary. Over time, as you practice setting boundaries and see that the world doesn't end when you say no, the guilt will fade. Your brain will start to rewire, and saying no will stop feeling like an act of betrayal and start feeling like an act of self-love. And here's the final truth. People who truly care about you will respect your boundaries. They might be disappointed. They might wish you could say yes. But they won't punish you for saying no. They won't guilt trip you, manipulate you, or make you feel like you owe them an explanation. They'll say, "Okay, I understand," and move on. And if someone can't do that, if they respond to your boundary with anger, cruelty, or emotional manipulation, that's not someone who loves you. That's someone who loves what you do for them. And you don't owe your life to someone who only values you when you're saying yes. So here's your boundary toolkit. Say no without over-explaining. Stop apologizing for protecting yourself. Expect guilt, but don't let it control you. And remember that anyone who makes you feel bad for having boundaries doesn't deserve access to you. Because your time, your energy, and your peace are not up for negotiation. They're yours, and you get to decide who earns them. Chapter 8. When the toxic person is family. Protecting yourself without cutting ties. There's a special kind of pain that comes with realizing that the person hurting you is someone you're supposed to love unconditionally. Your mother, your father, your sibling, your child. Society tells you that family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, that you owe your family loyalty no matter what. But what happens when your family is the source of your deepest wounds? What do you do when the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones tearing you down, manipulating you, and making you feel like you're never enough? You can't just block them and move on like you would with a toxic friend or partner. They're woven into your life in ways that make escape feel impossible. Holidays, family obligations, shared history, and the voices of everyone around you telling you that you need to forgive, try harder, and keep the peace. But here's the truth. You can protect yourself from toxic family members without completely cutting them off. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but it's possible. The first thing you need to accept is that being related to someone doesn't mean they get unlimited access to you. Family is not a free pass to abuse, manipulate, or disrespect you. You don't owe your parents, your siblings, or anyone else your mental health, your peace, or your dignity just because you share DNA. And the sooner you stop operating from a place of obligation, but they're my parent, but we're family, and start operating from a place of self-preservation, the sooner you'll be able to create a relationship dynamic that doesn't destroy you. That doesn't mean you stop loving them or caring about them. It just means you stop sacrificing yourself on the altar of their dysfunction. Because here's what nobody tells you. You can love someone from a distance. You can care about someone and still refuse to let them hurt you. And choosing yourself over a toxic family member doesn't make you selfish. It makes you sane. So let's talk about the specific strategies for protecting yourself when the toxic person is family. The first is emotional detachment. This is different from not caring. It's about creating psychological distance so their words and actions don't penetrate your sense of self. When you're emotionally detached, you stop expecting them to change. Stop hoping they'll finally see you and validate you, and stop taking their behavior personally. You recognize that their criticism, their manipulation, their coldness, it's all about them, not you. It's a pattern they've carried for years, probably decades, and you are not responsible for fixing it. So when your mother criticizes your life choices, you don't spiral into self-doubt. You recognize it as her pattern and let it slide off. When your father guilt trips you, you don't scramble to prove your worth. You acknowledge it internally and walk away. Emotional detachment is about observing their behavior without absorbing it. It's about being present in the room, but not emotionally invested in their approval, their opinion, or their version of who you should be. The second strategy is information diet. Toxic family members weaponize everything you share with them. Your dreams become things they mock. Your struggles become proof that you're a failure. Your vulnerabilities become tools they use to control you. So you stop feeding them information. You keep conversations surface level. Talk about the weather, neutral topics, generic updates that give them nothing personal to latch onto. If your mother asks, "How's work?" you say, "It's fine, staying busy." Not, "I'm up for a promotion and I'm so excited but also nervous." If your sibling asks about your relationship, you say, "Everything's good." Not the real story with all its complexities and challenges. This isn't lying. It's protecting yourself by controlling what they have access to. The less they know about your inner world, the less power they have to hurt you. The third strategy is limiting contact. You don't have to attend every family event, respond to every call, or show up every time they demand your presence. You get to decide how much contact feels safe for you. And you get to enforce that boundary even when they guilt trip you, complain, or accuse you of abandoning the family. Maybe that means seeing them once a month instead of once a week. Maybe that means phone calls only, with a built-in time limit. Maybe that means showing up for major holidays, but skipping the casual Sunday dinners where drama always erupts. And when they push back, you never visit anymore. You're always too busy for us. You don't defend yourself or over-explain. You simply say, "This is what works for me right now." And let them sit with their feelings, because their disappointment is not your emergency, and their discomfort is not your responsibility. Now let's talk about the unique emotional weight of setting boundaries with family, the guilt. Yes, we talked about guilt in the last chapter. But family guilt is different. It's heavier, more layered, because it's wrapped up in years of conditioning, cultural expectations, and the voices of everyone around you telling you that you're supposed to honor your parents, support your siblings, and keep the family together no matter what. When you set a boundary with a toxic family member, it's not just their voice in your head making you feel guilty. It's your grandmother's voice, your aunt's voice, the collective weight of every family gathering where you've been told that family comes first. And on top of that, there's grief. The grief of realizing that you'll never have the family you deserved, the parent you needed, the sibling bond you hoped for. So when the guilt shows up, acknowledge it. Yes, this feels terrible. Yes, I wish things were different. But then remind yourself, I am not responsible for managing their emotions at the expense of my own well-being. I am allowed to protect myself, even if it makes them uncomfortable. And choosing my mental health over their expectations is not betrayal. It's survival. Let me give you a real-life example. A man named David had a mother who was manipulative, controlling, and emotionally abusive. For 40 years, he tried to be the perfect son, calling her daily, visiting every weekend, tolerating her insults and guilt trips because he thought that's what good sons did. But it was killing him. He was anxious, depressed, and resentful. Finally, he set boundaries. He reduced contact to once a month. He stopped sharing details about his life. He emotionally detached. When she criticized him, he said, "I hear you, Mom," and changed the subject instead of defending himself. At first, she escalated. She cried. She told other family members he was abandoning her. Relatives called David, asking why he was treating his mother so badly. But David held firm, and over time, the relationship shifted. It wasn't warm or close, but it was survivable. David no longer left conversations with her feeling destroyed. He'd found a way to protect himself without completely severing the tie, which, for him, was the right choice. But let's also talk about the pressure from other family members. When you start setting boundaries with a toxic relative, other people in the family will often pressure you to back down. They'll say, "Just let it go. She's your mother. She means well. Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" This happens because your boundaries disrupt the family system. Everyone else has learned to manage the toxic person by appeasing them, walking on eggshells and keeping the peace. When you refuse to play that game, it threatens the status quo, and people will try to pull you back in line. So you need to be prepared for this. When a family member says, "You're being too sensitive," you say, "I understand you see it that way, but I'm not going to discuss this." When they say, "You're tearing the family apart," you say, "I'm protecting myself, and I'm not going to apologize for that." You're not trying to convince them or win them over. You're simply holding your ground. And then there's the question of holidays and special occasions. How do you survive family gatherings when the toxic person will be there? First, limit your time. You don't have to stay for the entire day. Show up for a few hours, then leave. Have an exit strategy planned in advance, a reason you need to leave early, a friend on standby to call you with an emergency, a car parked where you can make a quick exit. Second, bring a buffer. If possible, bring a partner or a friend who understands the situation and can provide emotional support or help redirect conversations. Third, stay in gray rock mode. Keep your responses short, boring, and neutral. Don't engage with provocations, don't rise to the bait, and don't share anything personal. And fourth, give yourself permission to leave early or skip the event entirely if it's too much. You're not obligated to suffer through toxic family gatherings just to keep up appearances. Finally, let's address when it might be time to consider going no contact. Because sometimes, despite your best efforts, the relationship is so damaging that maintaining any level of contact continues to destroy you. If being around a family member triggers severe anxiety, panic attacks, or depression, if they're actively dangerous or abusive, if every interaction leaves you emotionally devastated for days afterward, then you might need to cut ties completely. And if you do, that's not failure. That's self-preservation. You don't owe anyone access to you, not even family, if that access is killing you. Going no contact with family is one of the hardest decisions you'll ever make, and it comes with grief, judgment from others, and waves of guilt. But it might also save your life. So here's your family survival guide. Emotionally detach. Stop seeking their approval. Control information. Share nothing personal. Limit contact. See them on your terms. Prepare for guilt and pressure from others, but don't let it derail you. Plan your exit strategy for family events. And if necessary, give yourself permission to walk away entirely. Because you didn't choose your family, but you do get to choose how much power they have over your life. And protecting yourself from the people who raised you isn't cruelty. It's courage. Chapter 9. Surviving Toxic Workplaces. When you can't just quit 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's how much of your life you spend at work. And if your workplace is toxic, if your boss is manipulative, or if your coworkers sabotage you at every turn, those hours become a slow, grinding assault on your mental health, your confidence, and your sense of self-worth. But you can't just walk away like you can with a toxic friend or romantic partner. You need the paycheck. You need the health insurance. You need the reference for your next job. So you stay, and every day you feel a little more trapped, a little more exhausted, and a little more like you're losing yourself. But here's the truth. You can survive a toxic workplace without letting it destroy you. It requires strategy, boundaries, and a level of emotional detachment that feels almost robotic. But it's possible. And the key is understanding that work is not family. Your boss is not your friend. And your loyalty to a company that doesn't value you is misplaced energy that you need to redirect toward protecting yourself. Let's start by identifying what a toxic workplace actually looks like. Because sometimes the toxicity is so normalized that you don't even realize how bad it is. A toxic workplace is one where manipulation, bullying, favoritism, and gaslighting are treated as business as usual. It's a place where your boundaries are ignored, your accomplishments are downplayed or stolen, and your mistakes are magnified and used against you. It's a place where the culture rewards backstabbing over collaboration, where leadership plays favorites and pits employees against each other, where feedback is delivered as personal attacks rather than constructive guidance. And most dangerously, it's a place that makes you feel like the problem, like if you were just better at your job, more resilient, less sensitive, everything would be fine. But that's a lie. Toxic workplaces don't destroy people because those people are weak. They destroy people because they're designed to extract maximum productivity while offering minimum respect, support, or humanity. So how do you protect yourself when quitting isn't an option? The first strategy is emotional compartmentalization. You need to build a psychological wall between your work life and your personal life. And you need to stop letting your job define your self-worth. This is hard, especially if you're someone who takes pride in your work, who wants to do well, who cares deeply about your contributions. But in a toxic workplace, that pride and care become vulnerabilities that manipulators exploit. So you learn to care less, not about the quality of your work, but about the opinions of people who don't respect you. You do your job well because that's who you are. But you stop seeking validation from a boss who will never give it, or from coworkers who see you as competition. You clock in, you do your work, you clock out, and you leave the emotional weight of the workplace at the door. Your job is what you do, not who you are. And the moment you internalize that, the toxic people lose their power over you. The second strategy is documentation. In a toxic workplace, people lie, rewrite history, and throw you under the bus to protect themselves. So you protect yourself by keeping a paper trail. Save every email. Document every conversation in writing. After a meeting, send a follow-up email summarizing what was discussed and what was agreed upon. Keep a log of your accomplishments, your projects, and any incidents of mistreatment. If your boss gives you verbal instructions and then later denies it, you have proof. If a coworker takes credit for your work, you have a time-stamped record. If you're being targeted, harassed, or set up to fail, you have evidence. This isn't paranoia. It's protection. Because in a toxic workplace, your word means nothing if you can't back it up with documentation. And when the time comes to defend yourself, to escalate to HR, or to leave and explain why, that documentation is your lifeline. The third strategy is strategic alliances. Not every person in a toxic workplace is toxic. There are usually a few people who are decent, who see what's happening, who are also trying to survive. Find those people. Build quiet alliances with coworkers who aren't playing the manipulation game, who can be trusted, and who might have your back if things escalate. But be careful. Don't overshare, don't gossip, and don't assume that anyone is fully safe. Even well-meaning coworkers might inadvertently repeat something you said in confidence. So your alliances should be strategic and measured. You're not looking for best friends. You're looking for witnesses, for people who can corroborate your version of events if necessary, and for occasional support in an environment that feels isolating. Now let's talk about dealing with a toxic boss, because that's often the most damaging dynamic in a toxic workplace. A manipulative boss has power over your schedule, your workload, your performance reviews, and your career trajectory. They can make your life miserable in ways that are hard to fight back against, because they'll frame their manipulation as leadership or high standards. So how do you survive? First, manage up strategically. Give your boss what they want in terms of updates, reports, and communication, but keep it professional and emotionally neutral. Don't overshare, don't complain, and don't expect empathy or fairness. Second, cover your ass at all times. When your boss gives you an assignment, confirm it in writing. When you complete something, document it. When they criticize you unfairly, respond calmly and factually, and keep a record of the exchange. Third, stop seeking their approval. A toxic boss will never validate you the way you deserve. And chasing their approval is a losing game that will drain you. Do your job well, document your success, and find validation outside of work. From mentors, from peers in your industry, from your own knowledge that you're competent and valuable. Let me give you an example. A woman named Jennifer worked for a boss who was a textbook narcissist, charming to outsiders, cruel to his team, and skilled at gaslighting his employees into believing they were the problem. For a year, Jennifer tried to win his approval, working late, taking on extra projects, and constantly second-guessing herself when he criticized her. She was anxious, burnt out, and convinced she was terrible at her job. Then she changed her approach. She stopped trying to please him. She documented everything, every email, every conversation, every accomplishment. She built alliances with 2 co-workers who were also being targeted. And she emotionally detached. She did her job, she was polite and professional, but she stopped caring what he thought of her. 6 months later, when her boss tried to blame her for a project failure that wasn't her fault, she had emails proving otherwise. She escalated to HR with her documentation, and while the company didn't fire him, they did move her to a different department. It wasn't a perfect outcome, but it was survival. She protected herself, and she got out of his direct line of fire. But let's also talk about when it's time to start planning your exit. Because surviving a toxic workplace is a short-term strategy, not a long-term solution. If your job is destroying your mental health, if you dread going to work every single day, if you're having panic attacks, insomnia, or physical symptoms of stress, then you need to start planning your escape. That doesn't mean quitting tomorrow. It means updating your resume, networking, applying for jobs, building your skills, and positioning yourself to leave as soon as you can. And while you're still there, you protect yourself by doing the bare minimum required to keep your job while conserving your energy for your job search. You stop volunteering for extra projects. You stop going above and beyond for people who don't appreciate it. You do your job, you stay professional, and you focus all your extra energy on getting out. And here's the final piece. Recognize the signs that a workplace is beyond saving. If the toxicity comes from the top, if leadership is corrupt, manipulative, or abusive, then the culture will never change, no matter how hard you work or how many complaints you file. If HR protects the toxic people instead of the victims, if speaking up gets you retaliated against, if good people keep leaving and only the manipulators stay, then the system is broken. And you can't fix a broken system by staying in it and sacrificing your well-being. So you document everything, you build your exit strategy, and you leave as soon as you can. Because no job, no paycheck, and no career advancement is worth your mental health. So here's your toxic workplace survival guide. Emotionally compartmentalize. Your job is not your identity. Document everything. Protect yourself with evidence. Build strategic alliances. Find the decent people and align with them. Manage your toxic boss professionally, but don't seek their approval. And start planning your exit, because surviving is temporary. Thriving happens when you get out. You deserve a workplace that respects you, values you, and doesn't treat you like a disposable resource. And if your current job isn't that, then your goal isn't to endure it forever. It's to protect yourself long enough to find something better. Chapter 10. When to walk away. Signs the relationship is beyond repair. There comes a moment in every toxic relationship when you have to face the hardest question of all. Is this worth saving? Or is it time to let go? You've tried everything. Boundaries, communication, gray rocking, emotional distance. You've given second chances, third chances, chances you can't even count anymore. You've hoped, waited, and convinced yourself that if you just love them a little harder, try a little more, be a little better, things will change. But they haven't. And deep down, underneath all the hope and denial, you know they never will. So the question isn't whether you should leave. It's whether you're ready to accept what you already know. Because walking away from someone you care about, especially when that someone is a partner, a parent, or a longtime friend, feels like failure. It feels like giving up. But here's the truth. Staying in a relationship that's destroying you isn't loyalty. It's self-abandonment. And knowing when to walk away isn't weakness. It's the ultimate act of self-respect. So how do you know when a relationship is truly beyond repair? The first sign is that the pattern never changes, no matter what you do. You've had the same fight 100 times. You've set the same boundary a dozen times, and it's been violated every single time. You've asked for respect, for honesty, for basic decency, and every time you've been met with excuses, deflection, or temporary improvements that last just long enough to convince you to stay. And then the cycle starts all over again. This is the clearest indicator that the relationship is unsalvageable. When someone shows you, repeatedly and consistently, that they have no intention of changing, you need to believe them. People don't change because you want them to. They change because they want to. And if years of pain, conversations, and consequences haven't motivated them to change, nothing you do ever will. The second sign is that the relationship is harming your mental or physical health. You're anxious all the time. You can't sleep. You're developing stress-related illnesses, headaches, stomach problems, high blood pressure. You've lost your sense of self, your confidence, your joy. You're constantly second-guessing yourself, walking on eggshells, bracing for the next blow. And when you're away from this person, you feel lighter, freer, like you can finally breathe. But the moment they come back into your life, the weight returns. This is your body and your mind screaming at you to get out. And if you ignore those signals for too long, the damage becomes harder to undo. No relationship, no matter how much history you share, is worth sacrificing your health. Period. The third sign is that you've lost hope. There was a time when you believed things could get better, when you held on to the good moments and convinced yourself that the real person was the kind version, the loving version, and the cruel version was just a bad day or a rough patch. But you don't believe that anymore. You've stopped hoping for change. You've stopped making excuses for them. You've stopped defending them to your friends and family. And when you think about the future, you feel dread instead of excitement. That loss of hope is significant, because hope is what keeps people in toxic relationships long past the point when they should have left. So when the hope dies, it's often your psyche telling you, it's time. The fourth sign is that you're staying out of fear, not love. Maybe you're afraid of being alone, of starting over, of what people will think. Maybe you're afraid of the manipulator's reaction, the guilt trips, the threats, the emotional meltdown they'll have if you leave. Maybe you're afraid you'll never find anyone else, or that you're too damaged, too old, too broken to build a new life. But here's the thing. Fear is not a reason to stay. Love is a reason to stay. Mutual respect is a reason to stay. Growth, support, and partnership are reasons to stay. Fear is a cage. And if the only thing keeping you in a relationship is the terror of what happens if you leave, then you're not in a relationship. You're in captivity. There was one man who finally walked away. His name was Tom, and he spent 8 years in a marriage with a woman who manipulated, belittled, and controlled him. For years, he told himself he was staying for the kids, for the house, for the life they'd built together. But the truth was, he was staying because he was terrified of being alone and convinced that no one else would ever want him. Then one day, after another screaming match where she told him he was worthless, he realized something. He already felt alone. He felt more alone in the marriage than he ever had by himself. So he left. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't storm out. He calmly packed a bag, called a lawyer, and moved into a friend's spare room. The first few months were brutal. Grief, guilt, fear, doubt. But slowly, something shifted. He started sleeping through the night. He stopped flinching every time his phone buzzed. He reconnected with hobbies he'd abandoned, friends he'd lost touch with, and parts of himself he'd forgotten existed. 2 years later, he looked back and couldn't believe he'd stayed as long as he did. Leaving was terrifying, but staying would have killed him. Now let's talk about how to actually leave. Because knowing you need to leave and having the strength to do it are two very different things. The first step is to make a plan. Don't leave impulsively in the heat of an argument. Leave strategically when you're calm, clear, and prepared. If you're leaving a romantic partner, especially one who's been controlling or abusive, you need to think about safety, finances, and logistics. Where will you go? Do you have money saved? Do you have important documents, ID, bank statements, legal papers? Do you have a support system who can help you through the transition? If you're financially dependent on this person, start working on a plan to change that. Open a separate bank account, find a job, explore resources for people leaving abusive relationships. The more prepared you are, the harder it will be for them to manipulate you into staying. The second step is to expect an extinction burst. When you finally leave, the toxic person will likely escalate. They'll beg, cry, promise to change, and pull out every manipulation tactic in their arsenal to get you back. This is not because they've suddenly realized how much they love you. It's because they're losing control and they're panicking. If begging doesn't work, they might switch to anger, threats, or trying to turn others against you. This is the most dangerous time, because it's easy to second-guess yourself, to feel guilty, to think, maybe they really will change this time. But remember, you've heard these promises before. You've seen this pattern before. And unless they've done serious, sustained work to address their behavior, therapy, accountability, real change over months or years, these promises are empty. Hold firm. Block their number if you need to. Lean on your support system and remind yourself why you left. The third step is to grieve. But don't go back. Leaving a toxic relationship, even when you know it's the right thing to do, comes with grief. You're grieving the relationship you hoped for, the person you wanted them to be, the future you imagined. And that grief is real and valid. Let yourself feel it. Cry, rage, journal, talk to a therapist. But don't let grief pull you back into a situation that was destroying you. Grief is part of healing, not a sign that you made the wrong choice. And over time, as the fog lifts, you'll start to see clearly. You'll realize how much lighter you feel, how much space you have to breathe, and how much of yourself you've reclaimed. And finally, the fourth step is to build a new life, one where you are the priority. Fill your days with things that bring you joy, peace, and fulfillment. Reconnect with people who love and support you. Invest in your passions, your health, your growth. And most importantly, learn to trust yourself again. Trust your instincts. Trust your boundaries. Trust that you deserve relationships that build you up instead of tearing you down. Because the life you build after leaving a toxic relationship is yours. And it can be extraordinary. So here's the truth. Walking away is not giving up. It's choosing yourself. It's recognizing that you deserve better, and that better will never come from someone who refuses to respect you. And if you've been holding on, hoping, waiting for change, this is your permission to let go. You've done enough. You've tried enough. Now it's time to walk away and reclaim your life. Conclusion. Your new life begins now. You made it. You sat through every chapter of this audiobook, and that means something. Because the fact that you're still here, still listening, still fighting for yourself, proves that you haven't given up. And that matters more than you know. There were probably moments while listening where you felt seen, where you recognized yourself in the stories, where you realized that what you've been going through has a name and a pattern. And there were probably moments where it hurt, where you had to confront the uncomfortable truth that someone you care about is toxic, that the relationship you've been clinging to is destroying you, and that you deserve so much better than what you've been accepting. That pain is part of the process, because healing doesn't start with feeling good. It starts with seeing clearly. So let's talk about what happens next. You now have the tools. You know how to spot a manipulator in 5 minutes. You know the phrases that give them away, the tactics they use, and the red flags you've been ignoring. You understand gaslighting, emotional roller coasters, and why toxic people seem to find you no matter where you go. You've learned the gray rock method, how to set boundaries without guilt, and how to protect yourself when the toxic person is family, a coworker, or someone you can't immediately cut out of your life. And most importantly, you know when it's time to walk away. But knowledge alone won't change your life. Action will. And the question now is, what are you going to do with what you've learned? Here's what needs to happen. First, you need to stop making excuses for people who repeatedly hurt you. It doesn't matter how much history you share, how much potential they have, or how good they are when they're not being toxic. What matters is the pattern, And if the pattern is manipulation, disrespect, and emotional destruction, then you need to act accordingly. Second, you need to start trusting yourself again. Toxic people train you to doubt your instincts, to second-guess your feelings, and to believe that you're the problem. But you're not. Your instincts are valid, your feelings are real, and you are not crazy, too sensitive, or difficult. You've just been dealing with people who gaslight you into thinking you are. So trust yourself. When something feels wrong, it probably is. And when someone makes you feel small, exhausted, or constantly on edge, that's not love. That's toxicity, and you don't have to tolerate it. Third, you need to give yourself permission to prioritize your own well-being. This is going to feel selfish at first, especially if you've spent your whole life putting everyone else first. But protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't save everyone. And you can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. So start saying no. Start limiting contact with people who drain you. Start building a life where your peace, your mental health, and your happiness are non-negotiable. And if people call you selfish for it, let them. Because the people who truly love you will respect your boundaries. And the people who don't? They've just shown you exactly why you needed those boundaries in the first place. And finally, you need to remember that walking away from toxicity isn't the end. It's the beginning. It's the beginning of a life where you're no longer emotionally held hostage by people who don't deserve you. It's the beginning of relationships that are built on respect, trust, and mutual support instead of manipulation and control. It's the beginning of waking up without dread, of going through your day without walking on eggshells, of finally having the energy to invest in yourself instead of managing someone else's chaos. The life you deserve is waiting for you. But you have to be brave enough to claim it. So here's your final truth. You are not a victim. You are not broken. You are not unlovable. You are someone who has survived relationships with people who tried to make you believe you were all those things. And the fact that you're still here, still trying, still hoping for better, that's proof of your strength. Now it's time to use that strength not to endure, but to escape, not to survive, but to thrive, and not to stay, but to walk away from anyone who treats your heart like it's worthless. This is your shield. This is your power. And this is your permission to stop being the target. Your new life begins now.